minutes late, missing 2 members, Tom and Jody. I don't think they'll be here tonight. I know Tom won't too. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance, Mr. Prince.
Sure.
Allegiance, please.
So, I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Citizens' comments. Okay, hearing none. Educational update. First thing is makeup days.
So you know that we've already been out of school 6 school days, and in an attempt to make up some of those days, because it's almost inevitable that we're gonna have 1 or 2 more snow days before the end of the season, I worked with the unions to come up with some dates that would be amenable to them to make up some of those days. So the proposal is that on February 20th, which is the Tuesday after President's Day, to use that as a makeup day. We had a professional development day scheduled on March the 9th, have that as an instructional day for students, and then the makeup PD day will be the day after school that's out on June 18th for teachers. Then we wanted to use Good Friday as another makeup day. However, the day before, believe it or not, that Thursday, we had a half day. So what we decided to do is change the 3/29 date to a full day, and then go in a half a day on Good Friday, which will count for a day. So we will have all of those days, the 20th, the 9th, and the 30th, made up the 3 of those days, and at least we're gonna make up half of the days. So that's the proposal on the table. The teachers are amenable to it. I spoke to Louise Morrison, I met with the paras, I touched base with, Bill touched base with the custodians, and Dean talked to, was it Dean or Dave that talked? Dean. Talked to the custodians, they were amenable to that, and the driver said whatever we decide.
Okay. So it's decided, you don't need any action from us, right?
Well, I think to approve the calendar, the change.
Mm-hmm.
We just need you to later on.
Because we approve the calendar every year, so we have to be the ones to change it.
I mean, we can. I don't think we have to, but because it's already worked out with the unions. But if you wanna, somebody wants to make a motion to change those days, go ahead. We'll do it that way.
What happens? That's 3 of 6.
Mm-hmm.
What happens to the other 3?
So, and this will be another decision that you can make. The other 3, we're gonna extend the school year beyond the days that we were, but that's good because it bumps us right up to graduation date, which is currently the 18th. It will be a TV day for teachers and then graduation at night. So that works out if we have no other snow days. We currently have on our school calendar 181 school days approved by the board. However, state regulations say that we have to be in session 180 days. So you do have that other day if you chose not to have the kids come in on that day. So there's one sort of in the bank. I think we should just pay attention to the days moving forward. The teachers have told me, the teachers union told me that one of the reasons that they agreed to reduce the February vacation was that they would hold intact their April vacation. That's why it doesn't appear on the calendar anymore. And they're very reluctant. Many of them have holiday vacation day plans in April. So that's why we were trying to go around that particular week. And you know, it is a little disruptive because of Good Friday, and obviously if someone had a real obligation to their religious holiday, we would have to let them take a personal day for that day. So
I thought there was some goofy rule about once you submitted a calendar, you couldn't change the number of days. I thought we ran into that.
Did we?
Last year or 2 years ago when we were talking about graduation.
That's
weird rule.
That's when we're setting the graduation date.
Right.
But that's
It wouldn't affect
that's
this?
different.
Okay.
No, I don't believe so.
Yeah.
I say pray for no more snow. But At this point in time, I feel like at least we're making up half of those days. Really, the storm day in October kind of really put us behind and pushed us to the 6 days.
Want a motion so we can?
If
make
you
a
wanna
motion to
do it
discuss
that way.
further.
Okay.
I'll move to accept the superintendent's recommendation.
A second.
Second by Donna. Any other discussion?
Is there any other cost? Is there additional cost to this?
No, there isn't any additional cost to this.
Okay.
Oh, except for some of the secretaries, because they have a floating holiday, I have to afford them that floating holiday at another time, and if the custodian's the same thing, but I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Okay. So any other discussion? So all of those in favor of changing the dates, you know, that the superintendent has suggested, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody want to abstain? Okay, good. Okay.
Second.
Done.
Oh, okay. Done.
What?
Stop signing it too. Taking care of stuff.
101, come on. All right, budget discussion. You want to start us off?
I will. Thank you everyone for coming to the initial highlight of our budget presentation the last time. Obviously, and Mr. Bissett is right, it's a lot of moving pieces putting the budget together, and so we'll be making adjustments to that slide presentation. However, the budget that we have before you is $18,832,593. That is a 3.2% increase, and the actual dollar amount increase, Mr. Breen, is
It's probably the one thing I don't ever.
581,000. Okay. Now, that 581,000 budget increase covers the contract obligations for the new contracts that we put in place this year. It also takes into consideration increases in healthcare, and then it also assumes the full cost of our bus transportation, including replacement vehicles. So that is why that number is up. Remember now that all of that money that was on the town side for transportation, as far as replacement of vehicles, et cetera, is now being assumed in this budget. So we have everyone here this evening, all the administrators are here. I don't know if there's certain portions of the budget you want to go through first. And then I know Chairman Wachowski wants to invite just the central office people at a subsequent date, and then just the building principals at another day, so you can focus on each of those areas.
Right. So everybody had a chance to look over this. Where do you want to start? I mean, it's a big number that we're seeing an increase, but we all understand that we're assuming the town side of the transportation.
Do we have an idea of that cost, so we can just note it as a subsequent offset?
Got a schedule. You did get a
Yes.
schedule? Or did they get that schedule? Yeah, you got a schedule. The DATCO?
Right.
The DATCO.
No, I don't think I did.
Oh, I get that at some point, about 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one, there's the bid, and there's the additional, plus there's the 2 outside contractors that are in our other budget, so take that away from the 226, 111 from the 226.
Okay.
So what was that, Kathleen?
All right, but if I'm reading the schedule properly, the top, if you look on the DATCO year 1 budget, there's 1.2 million.
Yep.
Plus Neil has added 226,000 to that to get to the 1.45 that's in our budget. But of that 1.45, there's 96,000 and 22,000 that we already currently outsource. That's not DATCO.
That's correct.
So you take the 118,000 away from the 1.4 million, 1.45, 1 million, and that's the total DATCO cost. And I can't do it because I'm looking at it, but I have, you know, if you take the 118 away, you'll come back to what the DATCO cost in our budget is.
Yeah, and I think Mr. Breen had that. Do you have that number?
Well, we can do it right off the
I have what
schedule.
you, the same thing you have in front of you.
Right.
Okay.
Those two are already outsourced, the 22 and the 96.
That's correct.
Right.
Actually, the actual contracted number for this year is much higher. That's Mr.
Right, you're showing it as 156
In our
in
current
the
budget,
current
yes.
budget, but it is higher because I did look back to actual, and it's going over our current
We're
budget.
over budget for this year.
Correct.
That's the estimated cost for next year that Mr. Sugarman provided me.
The 96 and
The
22?
96, yes.
Yeah,
So what you're saying then, Kathleen,
Is
is
it's-
it's 133,745.42?
that's right, that's the BATCO cost that's in this 19 budget, FY 18-19 budget.
And just so you know that we currently are running a bit over in the special ed line for transportation, where we are making adjustments from other lines to get that covered, but it was due to students moving into the district.
If at the board's pleasure, at the chairman's pleasure, I mean, I don't wanna hog the whole conversation. I've been accused of hogging the conversation in the past, and I don't wanna do that. So I would like to give everybody a chance to talk first, but I do have questions on multiple line items.
I would never accuse you of doing that, so you're very welcome to start us off, and if anybody has anything to say, that just, they can jump in.
I actually approached the budget, my analysis of the budget by not only comparing it to last year's budget, but comparing it to last year's actuals. Because that's, and last year's actuals, what do they represent? What is encumbered or what we have spent year to date?
The last year's actuals column is expenditures year to date, and it's
Expenditure.
limited in how useful it can be at this point in time. We
Right,
still have
because
half
of
the
this
year to go,
kooky
basically.
budget thing that didn't get passed till November, and we have not actually spent a lot of money in some areas.
Correct.
Okay, all right. So then if I went back to last fiscal year, it'd be more useful?
To some extent.
All right, because last year's budget sometimes doesn't tell you a whole lot. It's really going back to last year's actuals, which means a lot more than last year's budget. But, for example, if I look at, on the first page, I'm looking at supplies, overall supplies, and if you could please run the budget by general ledger code.
Yep, we're gonna do that for the next
Okay,
meeting, to
next
have it in the
time, okay,
booklet.
thank you.
That
If
work
I
is
look
still
at
underway.
supplies, it seems to be that we're increasing, some instructional supplies at the high school and the elementary school, but in the middle school, there's a block of supplies. If I look on page, I should get my notes.
What account number are you looking at?
All right,
Kathleen?
I'm looking at percentage change, and if I look on page 7, in the middle school, I'm looking at a drastic drop in middle school supplies. Where in the high school, they seem to be going up, and in the elementary school, they're going up. And I get it that they're going up in the science because we're buying those kits. But why are they dropping when we specifically said we were gonna concentrate on the middle school? Because that's where we have a problem and we're losing and we're gonna put teachers in there, but now our supplies are dropping.
Well, I think that, and I won't speak for you, but I think when the principals came in with their budgets, we wanted them to come into as close to last year's number as possible, certainly meeting the needs of the programs that we have in place. But when we went through Scott's budget, Chris's budget this
Yeah, okay,
year,
we'll get it.
Chris's budget this year,
Yeah.
there were some line items there that we felt didn't need to be funded this year, so
Okay.
is that part of the reduction?
Yeah,
Chris?
there was some redundancy in
Okay.
some of the line items.
That's fair. I mean, if you feel that you don't need it, then I'm happy.
Yep.
I just was questioning because it seemed counter to the philosophy that we're taking this year. Okay, great. And I get the science is going up because that reflects the kids, correct?
Yes, there's 28, Chris, thousand that is being
Yep,
added at your
28,000.
building. And then at, the elementary school, we originally put in for grades K through 4. But for next year, we thought to reduce the budget, we would focus on grades 3 and 4. So we added money there. Into grades, and besides, we are piloting grade 4 this year, so the formatting of the kits is actually already taken care of, so we were able to reduce that line at Mary Fisher.
Okay, but we have in the high school, I've got a double, almost double, 80% increase in the high school in science instruction supplies.
We're adding AP Bio, correct?
Oh, okay.
So we need the textbooks and the lab equipment is a little bit
Okay.
pricey.
Okay, that's fine by me. There's a shift in the math, okay, phys ed, is that, are we adding somebody or doing something different in phys ed salary? Is it going up 3.1% or is that?
We did have a first step, physical education teacher that started this year, and then he subsequently resigned.
Okay.
So we hired someone that has a really extensive background, not only in physical education, but technology and behavior management.
Mhm.
He's kind of the whole package, but he had, years of experience that we had to pay for.
Okay, that's fine. And in the high school, I'm seeing some increases, and I'm assuming, new equipment, I'm assuming that has to do with the academies, cause overall, the high school went down 5.5%, so that's shifting of teachers, and I'm not going to get too hung up
Yeah.
about that. I'm looking at, the middle school has a 300% increase in science instructional supplies. So we're concentrating on that. You've already answered my question. And I know we're doing some shifting of, teachers and then we're moving the principal to a full-time principal, so that accounts, I'm on page 8 now. So that's accounting for the increase in the principal's salary.
Correct. Currently, there's a half-time principal at the middle school, and they're increasing the full-time, still leaving Mary Fisher with half-time.
Well, what's going on with the secretary, though?
The secretary, we have one full-time FTE, and this year I reduced the second one to half-time. We're gonna leave that one at half-time as well.
But that's showing us 18% increase on the secretary line in the middle school, yeah. Going up $10,000.
What if,
What page you on, Kathleen?
I'm on page, 8.
what account number, Kathleen?
That's showing, if I may, I'm sorry, I don't want to be out of order. I think I can explain it.
Okay,
So the 17.9% increase is a reflection of the 69,897 versus the current year revised budget of 59,265. So when we reduced it to the halftime, it's comparing that column to what the budget is for next year. The next year's budget is the full-time salary position plus a halftime. So it's roughly 47 plus 22, give or take, for 1.5.
okay, but why did we only budget 59,000 for this
We
then?
reduced it because we had the original budget for that line, if you look back, is I believe it's it would have been roughly the 88,000 that shows there for two secretaries.
Yeah.
So once we made the move, we were able to reduce it. But we also do have Tina from the business office subbing down there, so there was some salary before the change was made. It didn't happen right away, if I remember correctly.
That's true.
Okay, all right. And the other salary tutoring, that's going to increase a bit, even from what we've spent this year, from what we spent last year and what we budgeted. What's going on there? That's an 81% in tutoring. Is that going to be one of these math counselors or?
No,
That's been added to the request of Mr. Scott. He wanted to budget for 2 teachers, 2 days a week, 2 hours a day, 6 weeks a quarter. And Chris, just chime
oh,
in
is
when.
this the homework?
Yeah,
now?
this was the homework, this
Yeah.
was for the homework.
Homework? Okay. Cause, you know, when the Board of Finance looks at that, they're gonna go, whoop, I mean, it's not a huge number, but like Bill and Sean have said, that we've gotta defend these numbers.
Sure.
Yeah, currently Mr. Scott and Mr. Prentice are our homework help after school, but next year they have a bunch of shift those responsibilities as the teachers.
Correct.
Okay, so, and overall, the middle school's going up 1.1%, and which, if that's going to be our primary focus for next year, that's not bad for that to go up, you know, I'm happy for that. I didn't have too many questions. Language art instructional supplies going up 46%, that's $10,000 in the elementary school.
That is because, oh, I can tell you why.
Okay.
Right now, we have 5 kindergarten classrooms of 20 students each. Those students are gonna move up to first grade.
Correct.
We can't project whether or not we're going to get in another 5 kindergarten classes and need another teacher, although we've adjusted for that. However, we do know that we're gonna need another first grade classroom to keep our numbers at 20.
Okay.
And so that means all the ELA materials and even the math materials are going to have to outfit another classroom.
Okay. And I see the teacher in the general ed has been added. Again, the kits. And the reading salary is the reading technicians and taking out and shifting that out for counselors coming in under the Alliance.
So, under the Alliance, as you know, this year we are hiring 2 teachers from February to June under the Alliance money. And then the local side is gonna assume for sustainability. And we're adding an additional reading teacher at Mary Fisher, but we're reducing 2 reading paras to pay for that
Okay.
position.
Okay. And then the social worker is in there, it's good to see that.
We are too.
Uh-huh.
If we get the Alliance money again next year, can we continue paying those reading teachers, or do we have to assume them in our budget?
We do not have to assume them in our budget, but we have to just be mindful of the funding cliff that'll come down the road, where eventually we will have to assume them. They don't recommend that we put a whole lot of salaries on there, but things that we can easily terminate, like we talked about the RTI coach phasing out. So if we got into a bind next year, the answer is yes, we could do that.
Okay, all right. Because we will be an Alliance district for 5 years approximately?
5 years.
Okay.
That's something we have to keep a tight watch on. I mean, the whole point is to not have too much legacy costs.
Correct.
And
Right,
I
right,
know
Yeah.
just
next year
like,
already
just like
have-
that
Yeah.
stimulus money that we got,
Right.
just made it bad for us.
Yep.
So, and I agree, it's what we need, the most important thing we can do is teach reading, so I have no problem with it, and I want them to stay. I just wanna be mindful of how we're gonna pay for it, especially this first year this first go-around, because now we've assumed all of the transportation debt in our budget. We have huge increase in heating oil and diesel fuel, and I don't know what the healthcare is, but we got a big nut to cover this year.
I mean, is there any, I know I've mentioned it a couple times since this alliance came up, but, I mean, is subcontracting an option
Well,
rather than bringing them in as employees?
no, we have to bring them in as employees. We certainly, they're teaching positions, and I think our union will have some issues with
There's
that.
no way they would approve that.
Well, we outsource the
That's just it.
occupational
There's so many
therapists
things that we can
before.
outsource.
Yeah.
We've done stuff like that before, and if it's only for a short period of time, it's one thing, but if we want it forever, that's totally different.
Oh, right.
So-
Pay for it.
So if we're
Right.
able to, this year, obviously, the 2 new reading teachers that we're gonna interview, hopefully this week we're gonna get approval on the plan. that's all covered, it's next year. So in the budget, I try to make some staffing reductions to cover those additional, reading positions so that we can maintain them in the budget. I don't know how it'll flush out in the end, but that was the goal.
No, it's the right thing to do, and they should be in our budget going forward.
A lot of things should be in our budget.
No, I know.
Then you go to the polls.
Anybody wanna jump in, because I got a lot of questions on special ed.
Anybody else got anything off the top of their head? You know, what are we projecting the healthcare going up?
The broker told me the worst case scenario is 13%. I think I currently have it worked in at, I think, 7.5%. I want to go through all that again because that's going to be an ongoing work in progress as we go over the next couple of months. I'd be lying if I said I was really comfortable with where we're at with that number right now.
You're at
I want some
4,
more
right?
time to try to gather information. I'm meeting with the broker, I believe later this week. And that's the case with a couple of lines too. They're impacted by the buses going out as well. For example, liability, auto, property, workers' comp could change. Just it's difficult to forecast that. So those three are works in progress. It's going to take some time to kind of shake through them.
Bill, while we're kind of on that subject, where do we stand as far as getting more information from? That's what you just wrote down.
The E-chip thing, or
Yeah.
whatever it was?
Yeah.
And
Where
so-
are we with that?
So we need a subcommittee to start working on that, so if you could appoint 3 people of the board, we can start engaging with those folks.
Dal's not on it.
Yeah, Dal's not on it.
See these three right here? Thank you for volunteering.
She said it first.
But we would like to get that
But
done.
the next one's coming this way. But
Well, we're making all motions down there.
we have to go through all the subcommittees. I meant to do that the last meeting and I just never got around to it. But that's a new subcommittee that we really have to focus on because if we're gonna do it, it should be the next budget year, right?
Okay, yep, they.
Right, they said it was too quick to do it this year.
Right.
We could.
They talked about a mid-year transition too, but nobody seemed to be happy about that.
Well, it wasn't that, I didn't care about mid-year as much as they seemed to just kind of let us think, you don't wanna go too quick.
We don't wanna go too quickly
So-
but let's not talk about it for the next year.
Oh,
Let's start on
All
it.
right, let's just take this in order, because there are a lot of Can you take this in order, go through the schools and then?
Yeah, however you wanna do it.
Well, okay.
You have the floor.
I have the floor, I'm going through this in order. So, you're up. Scott, Mr. Sugarman.
Sitting right,
Yeah.
I'm ready for you.
All right,
What page, Kathleen?
all right, we are now at special ed, and that starts on page 12.
Page 11 at the bottom.
Yeah,
You
well,
have
essentially page 13. I don't have any questions until we hit page 13. You seem to be drastically dropping some numbers here. Like the I don't know what the general pro-tech is anyway, so can you explain that position to me and then why it dropped 82%?
Sure.
Okay.
That is the contracted BCBA.
Oh, well then that's fine. That's what we contracted out, we're gonna take it in-house.
Yes.
But where do we pick that up now then?
It is on, I don't know the exact page, it is on page, it's under the BCBA salary.
Bottom of page 14.
Thank you, Neil. It's the bottom of page 14, where currently we have it at the BCBA
Okay,
for
got it.
half the year.
35, it went up to 70. Okay, got it.
And just so you know, there's, that contracted position is split between multiple lines. So it's there under general pro tech, and then it's also, some of it is under, on page 11, under section 504 consultation. It's under there, which goes from 15 to 5.
Okay. And then page 11. Page 11. Okay, great, thank you. So that answered that question, good. The autism, I know that we dropped one of the teachers in that.
No, so actually that is just an accounting thing that we just cleaned up. So there was a teacher that was in there from previous, my predecessor that was in there.
Okay.
That I discovered at some point last year. She was working within the autism program, but she does not have a special education certificate.
Correct.
And so she doesn't have that autism. So we just moved that salary out of the special ed line into the school lines of the budget.
Where did she get picked up then? She's
Um,
not in special ed anymore, she's in the middle school, or she's in the
Currently,
elementary?
she's in a middle school position, but
Okay.
I can't 100% speak to where she might be next year.
Okay.
I think she might end up being, I don't wanna speak out of turn, but I think she might be in one of the new classrooms that we need to add. She might be going into there or. one of the
Okay,
new
but
ed-
then can you still run the autism program without replacing her?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
And can she go into one of the new classrooms without certification?
She's certified to go into one of the classrooms. She was never certified to be a special ed teacher.
Oh, I thought one of the new classrooms would be a special ed classroom.
That's a different thing.
okay, but I'm still concerned that we have a program that's running with essentially 3 teachers, 2 teachers, 3 teachers, correct?
So in terms of the autism program, what the program essentially is early childhood autism.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is Ms. Jones, mostly at this point, because our middle school or high school age students that have the autism diagnosis and needed that services, one of them got to the point, he was in high school, he is now outplaced. Because the level of need exceeded what we were able to offer. And we no longer have a middle school student in the wings specifically for that program.
All right, so right now there aren't.
The need is early childhood, early elementary.
Early childhood, there aren't enough children in the program.
Yes.
But if that were to change, we would then need to add.
We would look at evolving as needed if we are able
All
to
right,
do that.
okay.
What we do need to add at the middle school next year, however, is Mr. Sugarman developed a program at Mary Fisher for students who require a more restricted setting. They need a lot of behavior support. Some of our new behavior technician is in there with our new teacher, and we want to duplicate that program because it's successful at the middle school. And actually, 2 of those students are moving up from.
Yeah, to the element. So the other thing that you see in there, and I think, Bill, you were bringing this point up as well too. So right now there are 3 special ed teachers at the middle school level with special ed certification.
Okay.
Next year, one of those teachers is going to be reassigned to be the kind of self-contained behavior classroom, which would have 4 or 5 students at most in that classroom. So we're not adding on a new teacher, we're just reassigning one of the teachers we have. That keeps the other 2 middle school special ed teachers with caseloads at 14, which is phenomenal compared to other districts at a caseload of 14. The only position that we're adding in the budget in terms of those classrooms is the behavior tech role. So right now we added a behavior tech for this year. It was unbudgeted, we put it in other places. Right near we took 2 behavior tech positions in this budget for next year. 1 to now fund the elementary person that's here, and 2 to bring on the middle school behavior tech role, which would be assigned in that classroom.
How many kids are in the autism program now?
It varies because the autism program it fluctuates specifically with the early elementary. There are 2 kids that are in there kind of full-time, and there's an additional 3 that kind of come in and out, but they're in other kindergarten or other pre-K classrooms.
Now, there's a drastic drop in outside placements.
Yep.
But we're picking up $130,000 in something that either we've done or you've decided to break out separately.
Yep, I can explain that. So the drop in the special ed other placement line item is because we've just been working diligently in bringing students back to the district. I've been talking about it since day one. We started from last year, we started into this year, so we've gone from, at the beginning of my tenure last year, where we were at the high of 22, end of last year we were at 18, right now currently we're at 15. And so with the addition of the elementary self-contained class and the middle school class, we'll be able to start to bring those kids back. That also projects out some 12th graders that are no longer going to be needing services. And that's projecting out those exact numbers. The addition of those tuition under public, in-state, VOAG, and foster home, we just have been unable, Neil and I on our end, the EDO one and like the accounts, we just, there's gonna be some changes coming in April. So we haven't changed the title of those, but the purpose of those funds are specifically the $30,000, excuse me, is gonna be used for any diagnostic placements that we might need to provide for students within district. That is a student that either is new to us or a student that is having a difficult time within district, where we want to provide a 45-day temporary placement to do some evaluation of the student.
Okay.
The $20,000 is transitional tuition services. There are some students that need services 18 to 21. It doesn't mean that they get services all the way till 21, but it means that a student might have graduated or needs a little bit extra time that has an IEP, and they might need just some 3 months of career tech services, 3 months of job placement services, 6 months or a year. It just varies. And so we put some costs there to help cover that, so it's not just like a cost where we're trying to find money for. And the other one, the $80,000 under the foster home, is for, we labeled it on our end, it's not reflected here just because of accounts line, but that is to cover DCF and kind of new placement. And so every year, there's 1 or 2 kids that we can probably count on to come in that's either most likely placed within Thompson through foster home or DCF placement, and that student sometimes is already outplaced. And so that's to kind of account for some of that cost that we might see for next year. We just haven't changed the line yet, just because the EDO one, did I say the right EDO one?
Correct.
Might be changing in April, and so, but that's what those costs are covering.
And I just need to add on that you have done a really nice job all year. Every time we get those DCF referrals and it looks like a new student is coming in, that Scott and his secretary Kathleen have really done a nice job, and I think the last 3 or 4 we were responsible for due to their due diligence and being on top of that. So that's a lot of hard work the 2 of them do together. So.
Scott, how many post-grad age students do we have?
Currently or projected for next year?
Next year.
Next year, 1.5.
Okay.
Hate to call a kid a half.
Yeah.
And what it means, I think the one common thing just to say with 18 to 21 services, there is a misconception, even among state board members that have this, because I talked to them. 18 to 21 is for a very specific population in need of students. So just because a student, we might say, yes, they need 18 to 21 transitional services, it does not mean that they automatically stay on till they're 21.
Right.
We had a student last year that I talked about that stayed on till they're 21. That was very unique and rare. A lot of times those services might be for 3 months, it might be 6 months, it might just be for a year to help them get into a post-secondary career tech college and they need help with the application, or it might be helping with job shadowing a job. It varies. One thing that we're looking at that 20,000 can turn into potentially, another reason why we put it there, Putnam started their separate 18 to 21 program. And to the state's eyes, if you start a program for 18 to 21, it needs to be in a separate building because they need a separate class. They started that already. They have a teacher and a para, they have a van, they have connections. We've been talking, and I've been talking with my counterpart there, and Ms. Smith has been talking with Superintendent Hall as well, for us to kind of just join programs and us to provide a para to supplement that program, so that we can send like we can kind of save 2 spots there. So now that's just, we have 2 spots saved. We're joint with Putnam to provide 18 to 21 transitional services. the one thing that they kind of asked if we could kind of provide a para that has, I think it's a Class D driver's license, a specific driver's license to help with the van, because what you do is they come in, they do some career classes, they do some job application stuff, and then they go out in the community to a job that the teachers and the parents have found and placed for them, and they go out there. So that's something that we're gonna continually to look at doing and starting, hopefully in the fall of next year as a potential.
Scott, does Putnam also, with those transitional services, do they not drive the kids to their jobs?
They do drive them. That's why one of the things that they asked is because they have a great teacher there who has a lot of connections and has the certification, but I don't want to get into it, but for a variety of personal reasons cannot get the Class D or the special license. The para has the license. So they just asked if we did join, if we did decide to have that partnership, that the para that we hired, specifically the job application, had that as a requirement, that specific license, or the ability to get that license. But yes, what you do is you drive them out to their job, you stay with them for 2 to 3 hours, they get paid, you job shadow and stay with them, you come back at the end of the day, you do like a lesson to close the day typically, and report out on their progress and target what the specific things they need to work on. So, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I was about to say something.
No, continue. It's just a little concerning that we're going down below what we're spending this year to me. That's all. I know special ed is a very volatile number, and you have a lot of good programs in place. And those special behavioral classrooms sound like they're a success. And it's just, I don't want to add any more money to the budget, believe me.
I'll spend it if you want. No, but I think
it's a little scary, that's all.
No, I will say this, it is, special ed, it's always volatile,
yes,
right? That
yes.
one kid, that 2 kids could just kind of come in and it's $150,000 right there.
Right.
You all saw this year was reported the amount of new kids that we had and how much that cost was that came into the district that we just were unbudgeted for.
But neither do I want to budget for worst case scenario.
No,
either.
and so I
yeah,
just learned from my first budget season from last year and just trying to provide a truly accurate picture of what we are providing within district, and that's the thing I've been talking about, is that as we bring more services within district, that cost will slowly go down a little bit, but and then it might go up a little bit more as those kids expand, but we're just trying to be true to the numbers while still providing a high quality level of service.
And I appreciate that. I think we just have to try to drill that in again. This is the number.
So Scott, could you explain the excess cost grant again? In years past, we always budgeted our number for special ed. If we had an overrun, we could go back and get some excess cost. And it wouldn't be funded at 100%, but it'd always be.
It's like 70%.
It was 70%.
Yeah.
So how is that working now with the new budget?
Well, they haven't set the number yet. So that's the one thing, I just got the report from the Concase state meeting that they had. They haven't set the excess cost number. So we typically set it around $75,000. 70 is like a number you have in mind.
Yeah.
Where any student above that number, you get 70% of that tuition cost return. That's the excess cost. We have a couple students that, that are definitely over that number, and it factors in transportation. And so some of our transportation routes changed this year. That's why that number changed. Because of transportation, we had to provide, I believe, for some athletic purposes and other outside place students. So some of our routes changed. We had to bring on kind of a new contracted agency. So it factors in tuition costs of out-place students, transportation costs, and any ESY or related services that we're providing as well. So the number's typically around 70, 75,000 that we have in mind.
Right.
They haven't set the hard number yet at the state level, and typically the return of the reimbursement is 70%.
Yeah, a memo came in today, so I'll forward it to you.
Okay, so there you go.
So I was under the impression that that was all changing with the state's budget this year. That's because although it could be catastrophic in years past if people students come in, we knew there was, we could recoup something, you know.
There was a lot of conversation about getting rid of the excess cost.
Right.
And having a special ed kind of grant that they would kind of calculate previous year's excess costs and then factor that into what you were gonna get as a special ed grant. It was like a 12-hour change to get rid of that and to still maintain excess costs going into this budget cycle. So it was everyone was thinking and kind of settling on the fact that they were getting rid of excess costs. They were gonna have a separate, here's your ECS cost, and here's your special ed part of that. That was gonna factor in previous years. And it was just like at the last minute, they just kind of kept with excess costs because it was like, people were comfortable and used to that.
That's
Yeah.
a long way, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
I thought it was gone, or it was talk of it being gone, but it's still there, and it's over, what, 4.5 times our normal,
Yeah, so it's, yeah.
our
so
normal
yeah.
per pupil
So
expenditure.
we have less kids than last year. The number that we
Yeah.
provided to the town was less than what previous years because we've had, there was a couple there was one student in particular that was a pretty substantial cost to the town and district. And that student is no longer, he's over 21 now. So that excess cost, it kind of cut our excess cost kind of in half right away.
Sure, all right. Okay. Definitely.
Okay, back to me. We are now in the health department's fine. No, I don't have any questions there. We're now in the, I guess it's called district, we call it the district, or business offices,
District-wide budget.
Page, Kathleen?
Page 16. I guess you've changed some of the way we account for things, Neil, like like the superintendent's cell phone and the printing and binding, you put that all in one account? 'Cause I'm almost at the bottom, account 5532 and 50.
Oh, you might have caught something that was totally overlooked there. I will have to look into that and report back to you.
Okay, cause there's nothing in there for the cell phone, and the printing and binding probably all got thrown in with all the other printing expense, and that's probably fine. But the cell phone, I know she has one.
We want her to keep it too.
My next question was legal services.
Yeah.
I think we asked for you to look at that.
I think I'm comfortable reducing it. We're running favorably this year. We still have $9,000 in available budget, so
Yeah,
I'm
we have no
comfortable
contracts coming up next year that I know
right,
of,
so
so
I'm
let's
comfortable
look at
reducing
reducing that.
You can handpick the amount, or I can just make a
Well,
judgmental
you
reduction.
give it some thought, and, 'cause so far we've only spent 68,000. Last year's, we had a budget of 77, and you're predicting 85. I think that's excessive considering we have no contracts.
Yep, I agree.
So let's look at taking that, knocking that down, maybe even 10,000 or something,
Kathleen, hang on a minute. While we're on that subject, we talked about pricing that, quoting that.
Yeah,
Well, yes.
Yeah, we wanna
We
do
did.
a bid
Yeah.
for legal services.
Right.
Right.
We're very comfortable with our legal service now.
Right.
However, if somebody is,
Uh-huh.
a competent attorney with educational experiences,
And just the price check.
it's just a price.
Well,
check.
that and keep them on their toes,
Right.
That's what I'm saying, let's check
It's
it.
not a
We
open
know,
checkbook.
we know we'd like Dave.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah. And we might be able to split them or for certain things, but by all means, we had talked about going on RFP for legal services.
Yep.
Workers' comp is going down by 12%, is that, one of that is because we're losing people at bus drivers, I don't know what their, what do you call that rate, whatever their rate is. And also because of our joining with the town, I don't know.
That's just a guesstimate on my part at this point. I'm meeting with our broker to discuss a little more, because explaining to me that somehow Kerma may not want to necessarily reduce the lap coverage and the workers' comp as much as we might expect
Okay.
from the bus drivers coming off and the fleet coming off. He actually tried to explain to me that it might be more advantageous to us to just let them renew at the full rates, and then sometime after the start of the year, indicate that we're going to pull them off. I want to get more information from him because I don't quite follow, so I don't want to, you know.
All right.
Yeah,
Say
I
for
don't,
sure
I
until I
don't
have a
quite
chance
follow
to-
that logic either,
No.
so
It
find
is-
out.
Yeah.
You do?
Because
Okay.
what is that silly rate called? I can't
The
remember.
mod rate?
Mod,
Yeah.
mod.
Mod rate, yes, because they have, no, the mod rate is what you earned against your total. They have a certain rate because they're bus drivers, you have a rate because you're office workers, whatever that rate is. I still don't follow the logic of worst case scenarios 13% and we're losing 17, 18 people, our health insurance should really go down.
I'm working on the exhibit that spells all that, because there's a lot more into the calculation than just people and the rate. There's the employee contribution side that gets factored in, because that flows
Yeah.
through the account, dental,
And that went up.
among other things.
And that went up some too, per the contract,
Right.
so let's wait for that before,
Is
because
that,
I'd
is all,
like to.
is all the cost sharing reflected correctly in here?
Not yet. On the healthcare?
Yeah.
Not yet. It's still part of the big equation. I'll have an exhibit ready for that, for the book that'll go out.
Okay.
All right.
Because
With
I
the
think
preliminary estimate of it based on what I know at this point, we're, as I think I mentioned to you last week, that we're probably not gonna have a firm amount on the actual rate increase, premium increase, probably until late April, probably into May. That's been the case every
But
year.
it doesn't have to be actual, because in the last couple of years, Neil, we've gone in with, 12, and it's come down to be 5 or 6% increases
Right.
overall.
Well, that's why we took the initial estimate back and tried to dial it back.
Yeah.
And
So-
they negotiate on our behalf and try to get the lowest rate possible.
No, I get that, I'm talking about the contracts that
The
we
contracts, the
just did,
100%, I still have to work on all, and fine tuning all those.
Okay,
Right,
so
It's part of that
that could
spreadsheet.
take us down a good $100,000,
conceivably, sure.
at
Absol-
least.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a real chunk of change.
If it goes up high enough, even if we lose people, the rate might go up, but I don't think that's gonna be the case. I don't believe that would be the case. We're gonna take, people will come off of
Yeah.
there, and I don't think it's gonna go up 13%.
No, I
Who
don't
am I?
either,
When's
so
the last time it
I think we could see
It's been years.
significant savings there. So that's why I really would like to dig into that number, and if we could get that down to like 0 increase.
Unfortunately, it's typically, it's April, May, before we even get those numbers, and by that time, it's too late, so
We have to take our best guess, is what I'm saying, and look at prior years, what's going. And they're telling, in prior years, they told us it was going to be 8.5%, it came in at 5. They've told us it was gonna be 12%, it came in at 4 one year or something, or 6.
Well, they're always gonna err on the high side.
Yeah, but we don't want to all the time, we don't
No,
need to.
I agree, but I don't,
We don't need to.
we can't assume it's gonna be 4 or 5 and put that in, because if it does come in at 8 or 9, then we're in big trouble. So, I agree, we need to look at history and see.
And
where
add
we're
maybe
at.
1% or 2, but I'm not gonna
I
go
give
into
you- I give you-
13.
No, I'll give you that.
Okay.
A couple of percent should be fine.
If I could just add one more thing to that, there's also the factor of there's positions that have been eliminated, what coverage those individuals have, who they bump, and where we land after all that takes place, and that's somewhat hard to know at this point in time, so that's another
Well,
piece of it that has to be considered.
If you covered yourself, usually the purposes of the budget, if you assume everybody's got a family plan, then you're more than covered. I don't know, you play with it, that's your job, I'll let you
Kathleen,
play.
before we move on,
Yeah.
have we done any work, Neil, with, I forget the name of the company, when Dr. Hull was here?
That's what we were talking
That's
about,
what
the
Yeah,
engine.
That's
Oh, okay.
that's
That's
our
what we
new
need to look
subcommittee.
at.
That's our new subcommittee.
I've been invited to a meeting, I think takes place in mid-February, at EastCon on that. I will gather all the
Yeah,
information I
okay.
can at that meeting and report it back on what I find out from that.
Well, I know Superintendent Hull was interested in meeting with a smaller group to really dig into and getting the consultant back here, so we could certainly get the subcommittee going on that.
Sure.
Sure. And if you,
Football season in summer.
yeah, we'll do it, of course, we'll do it. If you will look at the top of page 19, first line, the facilities manager, what happened to that poor guy?
We'll probably be okay when all said and done. He has a little piece of his contract that I don't know the exact amount yet. I don't understand exactly how it works, but he'll be made whole.
Well, right now, he's not in there for anything, and I would like to see the poor man get
Well,
something.
absolutely. It's on a list of many things to check.
What are we looking at? Oh, yeah, no, okay, but he's got, the
He's going
projection,
down.
he's going down, but he's a good guy, he doesn't work, he doesn't
No, don't
mind.
worry, I got you.
He's over there
I
like,
think we
what?
should take care of him and
See
give
if I
him
answer your
something.
phone calls.
We have the beard factor that we negotiated in. The longer the beard gets, the more his price goes down.
Okay, and this is a new account, the summer help, where were they budgeted before?
Originally, it was all lumped in with the, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill Purge, the overtime line. So what we tried to do is break that out to show.
I believe they were lumped in with
Oh,
custodian,
substitutes, I'm sorry, I
substitute.
stand corrected. The
Sub-
substitute line.
Okay, all right, and so I do show a bit of a decrease, but nothing to that extent in the sub line, but okay. So if I added those two together, the substitute salary, I'd come up with 55,000. And so we're increasing that $20,000 from budget. And so you're gonna get a lot of work done this summer, right?
Well, so that number is based on what we spent this summer. We had,
Well, no,
I had
well, all right.
basically, I had 10 summer kids this summer. And they're not really kids, they're young adults, but I had 10
You spent
people this summer.
$46,000 last year,
Yeah,
okay? And year-to-date, you've spent $37,000. Most of that may be being in the sum, 37 and 17, so most of that, no, that's overtime. We didn't have summer help.
And not all the summer help, I believe, is the substitutes.
Yeah.
There are substitutes in that line that.
they're
Right.
also, they have always been lumped together.
Okay,
As one, and correct me if I'm wrong, Neil, we've always been over budget in that every year.
Pretty much.
So we
Yeah.
tried this year to make it accurate. So
Okay.
I had 10 temporary help last summer.
mm-hmm,
Now, most of the college kids don't work the full 10 weeks or the full 40 hours. They take days off here and there or whatever, so
mm-hmm.
that number we put in was based on 10 people working 40 hours a week for 10 weeks.
So you've overstated that number, so we can
So-
bring that number down to probably around $5,000.
Maybe.
Hey, I'm
We
looking for
could-
every nickel, Bill.
No, and in order to get the best estimate, we should go back to the payroll records from last summer
Okay,
and find out what did we actually pay them.
okay, and that's because last summer you paid less than 30,000,
Last
somewhere
summer-
around 30,000.
Last summer, I didn't have nearly as many people working for me.
All right,
And so when you state that I'll get a lot done next summer, all I can say is look around and see what those kids got done this summer. And
all
it
right,
was
but
amazing.
you're estimating 10, so are you almost positive you're going to get 10?
Oh, I'll have 10.
You'll have 10, all right, but they're not
And-
gonna work a 40-hour week. A couple will.
Yeah, some of them will, some of them might have to go back to school a week early.
Okay,
Some
so
of
I'm
them
saying
might not
40
get here
is
till a
on the
few
high
days
side.
late.
Some might go to the beach one day.
Some might go to the beach.
So if I put that
But
number in
believe me,
at
they hear about it if
35,
they go to the beach.
Well, the only worry I have is that some of the facelift that we want to give here at the middle school was actually accomplished by those 10 subs in the summer, rather than paying contractors, like all that
Correct.
painstaking grid
But
painting
what
and
he's
everything.
saying is he managed to get it done, and we know that, for under
The
40,000.
problem is the work this summer is more, correct? Yeah.
Okay, all right, well, we'll leave that for now, okay, other supplies, how did that not change oh, 'cause it's right on budget for this year. Okay, whatever, I'll go with that. New equipment, what is that? 13,500, what are you buying?
New equipment, that is, two pieces of equipment that are designed specifically to refinish the floors, the large expanses of floors, the cafeterias, the hallways. We've looked at it, it looks like it's going to be a labor saver. If we can't invest in bodies, we have to invest in some other ways to try to get some hours.
Okay.
So it's equipment that we've looked at, we've priced it out.
We need two, can we get by with
Well,
one?
they're two different machines to do
Oh,
the
okay,
same
two
job.
different
One of them is one of them removes the finish from the floor, and the other one goes behind it and applies the new finish to the floor.
All right.
Bill, would that do hallways, everything, or just, and can that do
It's,
hallways?
well, that's what it's designed, not for classrooms, it's too big, it's designed for the hallways, the cafeterias, vinyl flooring in large areas.
And the theory being you'll just accomplish the same thing in the summer faster.
Well, the theory being is that we might be able to accomplish some of the things that we haven't been able to accomplish in the past because they were doing floors.
Right, so if the
Well,
floors
no,
are
but
done
I mean, as
faster,
far
then
as
you
the
have
floors
more
go.
time.
If
No,
the
I
floors-
meant
right,
as far as the
correct,
floors
Joe.
go.
So if the floors, and yes, Bill, you're correct as well. If the
Yeah.
floors get done faster,
That's-
I do
then
it.
some other
Yeah.
things get.
I meant just as far as the floors. You'll get the
Yes.
same, you'll get it done just quicker.
All right, my biggest problem, which we need a backup exhibit for, I call them schedules, but exhibit will do, is of course, the fuel is doubling. Electricity went down, which is good, I guess, but the fuel is doubling.
I think Bill and I would be happy to give you
And you did give me a somewhat of an explanation, the price is going up and, the
increased
2%, the 2-degree increase in the.
Bill's projecting that that's gonna be an $18,000 gallon increase in consumption. So we're budgeting for 120,000 gallons this year as
gallon
opposed to
increase in
102.
consumption.
And at the time we developed this number, the price of fuel was $2.85 a gallon.
$2.85 per gallon, okay,
We bought it last year at $1.80 a gallon.
$1.85.
And the projections on fuel futures is that it will drop some by the time, I'm able to get a contract.
Uh-huh.
It's not going back down to $1.80.
No, I just paid $2.74 for mine, so.
No, but that's still, even if it goes up, it's not doubled. So why is it doubled here? Because if it was $1.80 and it doubled, that's $3.60.
Well, also you
Yeah,
gotta
but
add
18,000
18,000
more
gallons.
gallons.
We went
That's
from
not
100.
double
We went.
either, so,
We went
yeah,
from
I know.
102,000.
Let's look at the exhibit.
We
Okay,
went from
all right.
102,000 to, I believe I put it under 120,000 maybe.
Yeah, all right, let's look at the exhibit, because we need to look at that, that's like huge.
Kind of funny, hang on.
That's heating oil, and then of course we, yeah.
Similar, train of thought. Can we co-op with other schools
For-
purchasing fuel oil?
Well,
We
we,
do.
so we've been, so
We
this is
sell.
what, so we have been, we've been bidding this oil out for probably 12, 13 years now.
Yeah.
What we found is that we used to go into this consortium with EastCon.
Mhm.
And what happens is they try to put together a large purchasing group. But what happens is by the time they get the numbers together, put the bid together, put it out, fuel oil prices change daily,
Mhm,
in the morning.
mhm.
You get a quote in the morning, and if you don't sign on it by the end of the day, that quote's no good anymore.
Correct.
So what we have found historically is that we have done better by watching that price and making that judgment when that price is the lowest we think it's gonna go to do it, because when they go out to bid, now the bid has to be out for 10 days or 15 days. So now the oil companies, they're all trying to guess on the futures, and so they generally bid high.
Sure.
And in the past few years, we have even the town side of government doesn't want to go along with us because they want to follow that protocol of going out to bid, to a public bid. And we have done better than them consistently over the past 3 or 4 years by just watching that low price and jumping off the bridge that morning.
Well, I was going to mention that because Mike Martin used to be the one that
Yep.
dropped the ball and said, hey, we're going, this is it.
And Mike, for the record, Mike didn't do it by himself. He was on the phone.
I didn't mean that.
He was on the phone with Bev Capacco
Yeah.
and myself
Yes.
and the superintendent, and we would sometimes ask Mr. Bukowski what he thought, and we would kick it around in the morning. But you have to be able to make that decision by that night.
Okay.
But even in the last couple of years, Bill will watch it,
Mhm.
and when he thinks it's ready to go, he always spoke with Mike, and once in a while they'd say, what do you, call me, what do you think? And we'd make the decision if we'd see where it is. And he's done well by doing it that
I
way.
know, and I think, I don't understand why the town has not gotten back in the loop. I really don't understand that, but whatever, that's for them.
That's them.
Okay, and the same, of course, applies with the exhibit with the diesel for the busing. And if I may, now we can move down to the athletic stipends, and that's fine, but the coaches' salaries. We paid $77,000 in fiscal 16-17. We paid $32,000 currently, and we're going up to $93,000 for.
I have that budgeted fully at the full amount for all the coaching positions that are included in the.
And I know we adjusted those positions when we were doing the new contract.
Right.
They went up.
Typically,
Yeah, they're
they
going
don't
up.
all get filled, so
But
we
we
end
did-
up realizing some savings, but if I don't budget for them and then we do have them all filled.
Okay, so that's a potential pickup when
It
we
could be,
don't pay for
If they
it.
Maybe
don't
Deb
have
Spinelli could help
inside
us with
track
that
this
one.
year, if they don't have,
Right, so there's a potential pickup
Correct.
there.
So is that additional coaches though, or is that the cost of the coaches went up?
It,
the cost
Well,
of
I
the
think
coaches
both.
did go up, and he's budgeting to have
Everybody.
everything.
That's not gonna happen most likely.
The,
So I don't know, I think we kinda could look at that number and say.
the
we
problem, that's a double-edged sword in
Okay.
that,
You
in
know
the
more about
past-
this than I do.
yeah, in the past, we've had, one of the problems Deb has had is in the past, we've had people come in that are certified coaches that are volunteers. So they turn the money back over to the coach. What ends up happening is that budget gets reduced year after year, and then Deb can't get paid for coaches who come in. That's coupled with our rates are below average. So when we go out to look for coaches, if Killingly's got a job open, they go there because of whatever. So, you know, I think this has been a real problem for the 20 years I've been involved in the school, where Deb, you know, at the beginning of the school year, she'd have, it wouldn't be unusual for her to have 15, 20 positions open that she can't fill. And then when we do have good coaches that are capable of moving on, they leave for much more money.
But
You
we
know, so-
purposely increased the numbers, but not enough probably.
Not enough, but
we did increase.
But if we increase, yes, and I think we increased that, but not enough, but if we decrease this, we're just compounding the problem, that's my
Okay, so we'll
statement.
leave it.
So Joe, do you know if in that 93,000, there's room for JV softball and JV baseball coaches?
Probably.
I can provide the list as an exhibit, so you have the full breakdown if you'd like. It's right in the teacher's contract now, broken down by all the sports and every
Yeah,
position
yeah,
that's involved.
It's
Yeah.
added in, and he's accounting for it. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean we're gonna have a team, but
Correct.
if there's enough interest, and we could find somebody.
Again, it's hard to build a
Typically,
program.
yeah, I am with you.
And again, that's a two-sided coin in that you get a good coach, more people try out. You know, if you don't have a good coach, you get less.
Better, and more people wanna play because you're better. I mean, it's
Right.
a snowball. Okay. See, I even said something.
Thank you.
You like that?
I heard snowball.
Snowball. Technology, equipment, we've already talked about that, and then the same applies to all the others, and I'm done.
Okay. Any other discussion? I guess my big thing is healthcare, of course, the fuel oil, which has been, and we know contractually, how much did that go up, just the contract, our
Contractual obligations?
yeah, thank you. Because that's, we can't mess around with that number, but I just wanna see, out of the budget, what is that going up? And we know the transportation is up.
So, moving forward, I'm saying, next budget workshop, I guess. I don't wanna say this one's over, but, what I think the point you're getting to is I wanna really see an exact breakdown of where the increase is being spent. Because as you know, I've stated it time and time again for a year and a half now, it's important that the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen, and the residents understand the transfer of costs. And so exactly what costs, because, you know, I feel like we did what's fiscally responsible for the Thompson taxpayer on a total level. I don't think the school should suffer because we did what was right in the big picture.
Yeah.
And the residents, the Board of Finance, and the, Board of Selectmen need to all be on the same page on that. And so we need to have an exact breakdown of what transferred costs. I understand that the municipal side owns the buses,
Yeah.
and if they're sold, they technically get the money, but, when we make a decision based on the best interest of the taxpayer, we shouldn't be penalized for it. Because what's that gonna mean moving forward? We always have to worry about students and, we're doing the right thing, we wanna make sure the transfer is proper. So I think we need that very clearly spelled out.
I agree with you.
The severance deal for the bus drivers, where is that loaded? Is that in that, the whole
It's in the
deck?
110,095, it's listed on the district-wide severance.
Okay.
I have an exhibit ready for that one too. There's, the bulk of it is the bus drivers, as long as they meet the obligations.
Right, okay.
It would get paid
And you're
out over
assuming
time.
they'll all meet it?
I did.
Yeah, that's right, I think that's the right thing to do. The other thing, Bill, is just a general, I mean, we talk about it every year, there's general frustration in that we go through these budgets line by line by line by line, and we never have a Board of Finance member here to understand the lines, and then we're faced with this general one-line cut at the meetings, so.
Were they
I
all invited?
Danielle sent out a timeline
Yeah.
to all of them.
You did? Okay, so they were aware.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting you have the answer to this, because it's been a lifelong problem for the school, and that is, they don't understand the budget. They deal with one line item, and then they make recommendations based on that one line item only, without understanding the costs. So, I think there's a disservice not only to the town, but to the students when that occurs, and I don't know how to fix that problem, but I'm sure it's a problem every town faces.
Well, we did start off by making sure that they were aware of it. So, and I know they have other obligations, and people can't make all of them.
Well-
But we will, the next Board of Finance meeting that we go to, we will again invite them all personally to come.
That was a very responsible and polite answer. But I would remind you, how many of their meetings do we go to, and how many of our meetings do they come here to? And we're the biggest part of their budget. So,
I can make an outreach on behalf of the board and ask them if they could send a liaison to our budget workshop.
I don't think the board chair has ever been to a meeting. So that's,
Bill, I have a question.
that's a softball.
No, I agree, and I saw a text from one of the members who wanted to come tonight, but couldn't make it because she was at St. Joseph. Go ahead, Darla.
Bill Birch, I have a question as a new board member. Who's the oil company that we use, number one? And have we used them solely over the last 12, 13 years?
No, we're with Dime Oil this year. Last year, we were with East River Energy. They have been the two major players over probably the last 8 or 9 years. Prior to that, DDLC Energy was also one of the major players, but in the past few years, they've declined to give us a price. So generally, it's those two, Val, and it seems to go, kind of goes back and forth. You know, who beats out who, and when we talk about this price, we're talking about, it's, you know, the price is within a penny. You know, when we get those quotes in the morning, one might be a penny higher, one may, on a really bad day, one might be 2 pennies higher. And generally, when we stop bidding the oil, what we will do is, I'll get a daily price for, you know, maybe a couple of weeks until we think we see an indication that it's gonna start to go up again. And that's usually, it's usually around mid-April that, you know, oil starts to bottom out. Sometimes it goes lower than that, but it's also been known, after that point, it's also been known to go back up.
Have you historically signed contract in a given month? Has it always been April, May, June? And how many gallons do we use a year?
Generally it's April, May. We usually have a contract. Before June. And we generally, in the past, I would say 5 or 6 years, since we finished the addition on the buildings, we've been burning right around 100,000 gallons a year. Now, last year, we did very well. We had a mild winter, and in, I believe it was March, I think, Neil, we sold back 40,000 gallons to the oil company.
But this year, are you figuring 118? Is that it?
This year, we budgeted for 102. If it's remains
No, next year, because you said
next year we budgeted. Next year
so
we budgeted
120?
for 118,000.
I used 120, should we
I
adjust
see
it
that
down,
now.
Bill? You would give me 120.
120. Okay, so I figured the increase of 18,000 gallons.
Well, this
Thank you,
year actual will be a good indication because it's been cold and we turned up the thermostat.
Correct. This year's actual will be a good indication.
Okay.
I know it doesn't work for our timeline, but I know if you're buying oil for your house or you're buying propane for your house, you do it in July and August.
Yeah, and that doesn't work for our timeline.
So, but have
And
we,
not and
have you ever
and
checked
not
the
only
prices just out of?
and not always. So sometimes oil. We've had some years that oil has spiked in the summertime.
Have you ever, do you check the prices in the summer, or you not even bother because you've already bought?
Once we sign the contract, Sean, and summertime rolls around,
I
I'm
know.
on to other things.
It's
Don't
just,
wanna know
I'd
the
be curious. I'd be curious if we had any
Well,
historical.
The fuel
data.
oil, the healthcare, and the state budget never work to our
work for- right.
benefit. And we usually get those numbers after we're trying to
Yeah.
pass a budget.
I know.
It's crazy. Other questions for anyone?
The message I've been getting on ECS is that not to expect any increase in ECS funding for next year.
But no decrease. At least.
Well, no decrease as far as we know, but they can always cut it, they can
No, I
always
know,
chop it.
I know. But as of now, we can
Because
assume no
the
increase.
state's not in any better shape, so they might, who knows?
They have held harmless the alliance districts.
Yeah.
I mean, again, that's something we gotta really keep an eye on, because I just saw Canterbury is at wit's end right now,
Yeah.
because they were taken off the list, and then they're stuck with a situation they don't know what to do with.
Right.
You know, and they're looking at closing schools and all kinds of things, so.
And weren't they already at like a 39 mil?
They're, yeah, it's, yeah,
Their mill rate was like 39?
yeah, so we just gotta
Yeah.
make sure we,
But that's a
Keep
very,
that in
that's a
mind.
very, very small town too.
Very small.
If that happens here, it would hurt a lot more.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's why we have to keep our eye on, as John says, legacy costs. You can't do that.
All right, anybody else have anything they wanna bring up tonight? All right, so when is our next meeting gonna be?
We don't have to schedule to the regular February meeting. We can schedule one for next week.
I'm free next Monday.
I don't think we should stop, because,
No.
because we have a month to put this together and present to the Board of Finance.
Yeah,
So
let's keep
can people do it
rolling.
next week?
Yeah, I think so. I may not. On Monday, I'm in Chicago.
Tomorrow, Bill, next Monday is our Board of Trustees meeting,
Oh, yeah, so we can't
Okay,
do it
so
Monday.
give me
anyways.
another day.
How about Tuesday?
the 12th.
Oh, where's my calendar?
Oh, so that's,
Yes, the 12th
Next
is,
Tuesday's, yeah, but next Tuesday's
No,
not.
our-
Next Tuesday's one.
our 12th is the regular meeting.
Next
Tuesday.
Yeah, February 6th is open, I think.
Yep, I can
don't
do
have
the
anything.
6th.
The 6th,
And we can do the presentation. And if we need to do it in the auditorium, then put the table down below the stage so that we.
Either that,
Yeah.
either that, or at the very least, we're gonna put it like this.
Very
So we
hard
can
to hear.
talk.
No, the problem is the speakers. They go out into the auditorium, so where we sit, we don't hear, they're over our head, and they project out over us.
That part doesn't bother me, it's because
Oh.
we're straight out this way, I can't hear.
Well,
hear or see
that
you
may
guys.
be, that may help,
So
but.
just do, I mean, we do a very slight, but do a bigger one.
Well, the
to
Board
say-
of Finance does a U now too, because they found,
Yeah, I can't hear anybody down the other end, it's very difficult.
So we're looking at next Tuesday?
All right, so can everybody do next Tuesday?
Yes.
If you're in town, if you're in town.
I'll alert the Board of Finance.
6:30?
Well, that's true, they might be talking about the bay, but we've got to go.
All right, so 6:30 next Tuesday in the auditorium. Now, do we wanna do schools, specific schools, we wanna do, technology and facilities?
I'm all set with facilities, I think we're all
Okay.
set, as long as we get the backup schedule. I think we're set with
We
facilities.
just wanna have the schools available, so we can go through the schools?
This will be on the sixth, or the fifth? Sixth.
Six.
six.
Each school will not be present.
Bill, I'd say
Sixth is Tuesday?
that was-
Yes.
All of them can make it.
That works.
And we will have the package with the
Yeah, you're putting together the,
exhibits, and I want the budget by,
Mr. Green, Kathleen has a question.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
okay, will we have the package with the exhibits by next Tuesday?
Yes.
And the budget run by accounts, that total?
Yeah, I have the notes on what you asked for. I'll
Okay, thank
Mary
you.
put it in the packet.
Thank you, 'cause
pretty
that
much
would
look very
help.
similar to the ones that looked in the past.
Oops, I forgot to put what we're reading for. And you'll have the presentation draft form, and then we'll go through that.
The one I gave the last time, you wanna see that again and
Right.
corrections?
Well, yes, but then we need to have, with that would be what Sean, here are, did we have that the last time?
Are you gonna give us ideas of what
Well-
additional information you want on those
Yeah,
slides?
usually as we go through it, slide
Okay.
by slide, it'll
Yeah.
come to everybody, you know what, let's add this, let's take that out, that's why we,
Right,
just keep
but then
going
you
through
would
it.
have the total budget, dollars, you gotta put some dollars
Right.
in there. And the dollars, here is where the major increases come from, but here is where the major decreases come from.
Okay.
Right.
And please have them foot correctly, add up correctly,
Yep.
please.
Well, I didn't have those numbers when
No, I know
Right,
that,
right.
I know that, so they're not in that presentation that you
Okay.
gave us. That
Right.
was just kind of a skim with words. Now we have numbers to put to it.
Right. Again, the key is justifying it. The numbers are the numbers. We can tweak, we can.
Yeah, we just want an explanation.
We just
of
want
that.
it, right.
That's-
Yeah.
We wanna be able to explain it.
Anybody else have any other comments, questions? If there's something you wanna see next Tuesday, please email Danielle and get it, updated. All right, we got,
Mayor, clarification. Moving forward, should there be cancellations that of course will tack on to the end of the school year in a normal fashion?
I'm assuming so.
Just clarify.
Except, you did say that we do have the one that we could, the one you said it's in the bank, so we may not.
We could.
We could. I just was clarifying that was part of what we said. I'm not saying we should, mind you. I was only just
We could.
putting all the information out there.
Yes, yes,
And
you're
I'll
right.
just for the record again, make comment for our teachers that with the graduation date preset in September, hoping that that's still within their contract time so that they are not starting their summer vacations already.
All
We
right.
want to talk a little bit about the Apex contract.
Right, so I was just looking at this now, we already revised our calendar, so we have the Apex contract approval.
So Heather, so as you recall, we started to research E-rate funding to help offset the upgrade that we need of the infrastructure for our wireless access points, so that we can add devices and not get knocked off, which has been happening on the campus. One of the things that Valentine did tell me is that she has a company that is willing to donate some of the cabling, that if you could share this with that company to see if some of the cabling dollars could come off of this before we approve the contract with Apex. But if you want to talk through the total cost of the project, what we're getting from E-rate, what you're using this year's money for and next year's money for out of the tech budget.
Okay, so the way that it works for E-rate is they allow us $150 per student, but we only get reimbursed about 60% of that back. And that 60% is based off the free and reduced lunch numbers. So the total project is about $217,000. What I have to apply for, taking into account the $150 per student, what I'm applying to E-rate for is $153,000. So we'll get 60% of that back, which is about $92,000. We'll be getting reimbursed through E-rate. So this year's budget, I haven't spent anything out of my hardware, so I will be able to use my $78,000 to cover some of that from this year's budget, and then next year we'll leave the balance of about $47,000 that I'll have from hardware to complete the project. So it's a good chunk of money that we'll get
That's a nice
back.
chunk of money from E-rate. So
Mhm.
I thank Heather because it's cumbersome, and I thank the board for allowing us to go with E-rate online, who has been very helpful, I believe, Heather,
Yeah,
processing all of this.
definitely. They do all the paperwork behind this.
So I know we've worked with Apex before, but are they the only people
I
that
had
have
one.
bid this?
I had one other bidder who came in higher.
Okay,
So
okay.
yeah.
And it was vetted through a really rigorous process because it's federal dollars, right? There were a lot
Yep.
of strings attached to that bidding process.
Yeah, I had to
Okay,
fill
well,
out
project.
like an assessment, a bid assessment sheet to
Yeah.
show why I picked Apex. And
Okay.
So I would say that, connect with Valentine
Mhm.
and get that company's
Okay.
name and then show them this.
Yep.
Because if there's anything that they're gonna donate, that'll come off
Yep.
your expense side.
Yeah, so I don't have to have this finalized until March is when we have to submit it to E-rate.
Okay. Do you wanna
So.
wait to vote on it, or do you wanna approve it with, pending a review of what we can get taken off?
Well, we're all here, let's
do it.
approve it. Right?
Not to exceed whatever.
Motions are down.
Where's the motion?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I'm confused with the two
Motion
different
default.
numbers though.
The 153 versus the,
157 over there on the dark side.
where's the 153?
You've got,
Oh, okay, so the 157,
they're different,
they are different, yeah.
I don't know, which one are you, you're just
Okay.
applying for the 153?
For the 153, yeah, because
Okay.
I had to be at or below that 157 number.
Okay. All right, so if we just do not to exceed the 153, be fine.
But the total cost is 217 minus the 92 that we're getting from E-rate funding.
I mean-
And it's straddling two budgets, that's the,
Okay.
the sticky wicket with that.
Al?
I know we're all here, but if we're gonna be meeting again next Tuesday, why don't we have the Apex contractor actually be voting on that now? I mean,
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
yeah.
right now we're looking at a
Probably better.
spreadsheet.
Let's, let's clean up the numbers
Right.
and just to make it clearer for us, please.
Yeah.
Put it on next
And then we're gonna be together on Tuesday, we can do it then.
Heather, are you gonna get, Valentine the cable specs?
Yes.
Specific, okay.
Yeah.
We know a few cable guys.
And we certainly want to thank you too
Live
for
on cable.
trying to get the people.
1, 2, only looks like there's like 5, 6,
All right,
7, 8, 9, 10.
Military.
All right, anything else?
One, two.
Citizens' comments? Sir.
Yeah, Joe Kaczynski, Sunset Hill Road. Could you tell me what amount are we absorbing from the town relative to transportation costs?
I think that's the breakdown.
Do you have that? Do you have that, Neil?
I don't have a
That would be,
specific amount,
that would be
but
the two buses that was in their capital side plus, well, they started off with 3 buses, now it's some leasing.
Well, right, but when
58,000 for the lease.
When we did our calculations, we based it on, I thought, more than 2 buses,
Well,
because that's what we.
But what was in the budget, John, was 257,000 for the 2 buses
Okay.
and 58,000 for the lease of the 2 buses from this, what would have been this year's budget.
Okay, so, excuse me, so let's not confuse capital versus operating expense. What's coming over into this education budget as an operating expense as opposed to a capital item?
That's the problem.
Well, that's, yeah.
That's the problem. In the town side of the budget, it's a capital expense.
Right.
But because we're doing a contract for outside resources, we're picking it up as an operating expense, which on the town side of the budget showed as a capital expense because they bought the buses. We are no longer buying buses, we are in essence leasing or contracting for services.
So to the taxpayer, it's a pass-through.
Through.
It's shifting it from the town side and we're absorbing it in our budget.
Okay, but the town is also financing, I'm assuming, the buses, so they're covering, if they have to, in debt, just the current year cost for the respective buses, as opposed to.
No, that's no longer the case.
They had in the past, they bought everything outright.
Right.
They never financed anything.
I think that's why I like these numbers, for this exact
Mm.
reason.
Right.
So we have a clear explanation of what is being passed through, what is being transferred. That's why I like that for the next
We will
meeting,
make
for
that
that
clearer.
exact
We will
reason.
make that
Mhm.
So
much
it's
clearer.
clear, the total dollars to the taxpayer.
Town, this was the first year that the town was actually going to lease buses. They did not end up leasing buses because we didn't buy any new buses this year. All, in the past, they have always, bought the buses outright as a capital expense. So they're shifting what was their capital expense over to our operating expense.
I highly recommend somebody have a schedule put together. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yep.
I'm looking at the bottom line here, you have approximately a $600,000 increase.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like it's all coming in for the most part in transportation. You have some ups and downs in some of your line items, but I would try to make that specifically clear so
We
that
understand.
people understand what's transpiring.
A big chunk of it is transportation, it's not all of it, but we have the
But, yeah,
healthcare and the
right.
contracts in there,
Right.
and the fuel oil, those are the big ones,
Right.
but the lion's share is that. But we're just taking it from the municipal side and shifting it into our budget.
And there's the one-time severance, I mean, there's things that we have to explain,
Yeah,
that's all.
yeah.
It's about over $300,000 that's coming from the town to us.
So,
Anything else, Joe?
No, that's it.
Other comments? Motion to?
Nope, nope.
No, I'd just like to apologize for
That
speaking
was-
out of turn. I thought we were already on citizens' comments when I spoke out earlier.
Are you a citizen?
That's all right. We're used to you, that's okay.
Apologize.
That's all right.
I would encourage the board to go see the prototype for the window.
Oh, I
It's
saw
in-
the
Saw that
picture.
online,
Yeah, I
it's
wanna.
very nice.
It's in,
Dark
can't-
out now though, Tom.
I can't thank Bill enough for all the work he's done on that, because it's been over a year working on this project, so. And we also had some unexpected cost savings, we're gonna be able to do some additional windows that Bill recommended to the Board of Trustees, so it'll be, this spring, this summer, phase one will be done. Well,
I think you ought to give it a
by the time school starts next year,
A whole year, one window, Joe? You gotta be.
That's a tough average.
uh,
And you're cutting his pay.
and you're cutting his back.
But the computer's getting off.
Motion to adjourn.
Adjourn.
There's a motion, can I have a second? You guys are supposed to be making
You're
motions.
supposed to be making
Can
a
I have
Motion to adjourn, please.
No.
Now, then you
I'll
can have the
second.
second.
So, okay.
All in favor, please say aye.
Let's do this.
Thank you, we're
There
adjourned.
goes